Hey everyone, welcome to the Story Builder podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to be with my friend Todd Foley. Todd is a screenwriter, he's a novel writer, he's a digital content producer. Todd, thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks so much for inviting me on, Jem. It's a pleasure.
I
One of my first internet friends, I gotta say.
you're right. We've
Yeah,
known each other so long now. It's like
yeah,
we're before Twitter. We're almost in the
hmm
MySpace age.
absolutely. Yeah, it
Almost.
was blogosphere days.
And now, Todd, you've
Mm.
been really hitting it hard as a screenwriter for the past 7 years. And
Mhm.
can you just give me a little recap? How did you get into screenwriting? I originally knew you as kind of the fiction writer because you'd written a couple novels and I really connected with your style. And then I remember like one day I was like, Todd just started screenwriting. Where did this come from?
There was a switch.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah. So my background, yeah, I had written about, let's see, I think three like short novels, and always like I was that was my bread and butter. Like, not bread and butter as far as revenue. Didn't get any money from it, but as far as like my passion for being a storyteller. And then I had left a pretty stressful corporate work environment in at the end of 2017. Took a vacation with my family, and I had finished reading the book on the plane. I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reed, and it was just one of those random ones that I had picked up, and I finished it on the plane, and I turned to my wife. I'm like, okay, I'm going to spoil this for you. I'm going to tell you every single plot detail and how it made me feel. I'm like, oh, this is what I've been doing since I've been a kid. But it was one of those stories where I was like, I need to talk to someone about this, and it made me realize how much I love stories that get you talking, whether it's something that you love, you're terrified by, that you're mad about, all those things. And so then I came back and I thought, you know what? I think I need to start writing again. And I started a collection of short stories, and there was one that featured like a um, Instagram influencer turned killer that I remember you were, I think, the first person I sent that draft to. I was like, okay, I just vomited this out.
Yeah.
What do you think? And it was the most, I think I remember you saying, like, I could tell that you had fun writing this. And yeah,
This
that
is
was
like a
sort of like,
time machine. This is like a
yeah,
time machine. I'm
totally. Yeah,
connecting the dots here.
I hadn't actually connected it this much until now. Yeah, just chatting through it with you. And I so then I self-published, yeah, collection of short stories, and it was the most fun I had ever had writing. I really had found my passion again, and a lot of people were like, the feedback I got was like, oh, like I especially loved this one,
Mhm.
but I wish there was more of it. Like, it was only, I think, like 10 pages long. Like, it was probably about barely 2,000 words. So I thought, oh, like people are really like clinging to this. That's cool. I wonder if there could be like a further life in this. And um it's gonna sound cheesy, but I feel like this it was watching the Oscars in 2018, and Jordan Peele got the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Get Out, and that was like kind of
Mhm.
one of those first times where I'm like, okay, this is one of those movies that I finished and I had to talk to everybody about it. And
Mhm.
I'm like, it all starts on the page, and that's when I kind of started diving into reading scripts, and I got a book from the library and just totally began a self-taught journey and turned that short story into a feature thriller. And that was, yeah, so that was the start of my journey and kind of where I
Yeah.
went from there, kind of taking my own story that I had already, taking my own IP, I guess, and then adapting it into a different medium. So
That's
yeah,
awesome. I'm connecting the
I think that's the
dots.
road. Yeah.
I think that is the road, but I think that I want to throw in
Mm,
a few parts to help fill in
okay.
if so others can follow along. You went to California because you're on the West Coast.
Mhm,
And I remember that being super inspiring, just
mhm,
being in that area.
yeah.
And I remember that book, I'm thinking of ending things because you're like, you got to read this, you got to read this,
Yes.
and I read it,
You were one
and
of the people I told, yeah.
I did, and I was like, it was a quick, fun read, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that was twisted.
Yeah.
Wow, that was not what I expected. That was surprising.
Mhm.
And not that long after, I remember your short story that I think my thought was, it was like, it's a twisted love story like Pulp
Mhm.
Fiction. It's like a twisted love story meets Pulp Fiction because it was
Mhm.
like very non-linear, cross-threaded, lots of
Mhm.
relationships. And that became Love or Something Like It, right?
Mhm. That's correct, yeah.
That's the title, Love or Something Like It.
Mhm.
And one of your characters, the assassin, if you will, the
Mhm.
main character, the killer, um, you ran with that further and you made that a screenplay, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. And then and now you're more in the horror genre
Mhm.
than thrillers with,
Yeah,
assassin femme
totally. I
fatale
feel like,
killers.
I've got, still kind of figuring out exactly what my brand is. So I have a writing partner as well, and he
Mhm.
and I generally do. We're in the horror vein, and I've been pursuing more horror in general. But I have written a few of I'd call them like elevated lifetime thrillers. I guess sort of like the grounded grounded thriller, but a little more like a little more R-rated, a little more gritty and violent.
Yeah.
But sort of that kind of that throwback domestic thriller vibe from the 90s and
Yeah.
80s and early 2000s. That's like another one of my sweet spots there too. So
And those are
I would
so
say
hot. Those are
yeah,
so popular.
yeah, and I had like they go down easy, but I like the ones like I know we've talked a ton about Gone Girl. Like that's
Mhm.
sort of one of my
Right?
I'm a Gone Girl fan girl for sure. And I think one of those ones that like it goes down easy, but it's like, oh, there's a lot of meat on that. I'm like, it takes a while to digest. So those are that's kind of those are the ones that I love to talk to people about, and that's what I
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
to get that kind of cathartic feeling.
Do you see the line being pretty blurry between thriller and horror?
I do for me. Like I know that like growing up, I always thought that horror was like The Exorcist. Like that was
Mhm.
kind of the be all end all.
Sure.
But and I mean, there's so many different subgenres of both of those
Yeah.
genres. But for me, like I wasn't allowed to watch any kind of horror movies as a kid.
Sure.
But we would watch those domestic thrillers, and to me, like I didn't see this one until I was older, but let's say like Fatal Attraction, like there's no
Sure.
monsters in there,
Sure.
the but the person like when the threat kind of infiltrates the home and like
Mhm.
home is like that's a safe space as a kid. So the thought of like a bad
Right.
person coming into your home or into your life, like those characters were they were my monsters under the bed. So that's where I feel like I can lean into that horror a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally
Yeah.
get that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
Would you consider like Silence of the Lambs or Seven to be in that
Hmm.
same arena?
Yeah, I definitely like I know that there's I consider both of those horror for
Okay.
sure. Even though they're in like yeah, I don't and again, I don't really know
It's
what
blurry, isn't it?
it is
It's
blurry, yeah.
crazy. Like I
Yeah.
could say crime. I could just say it's
Mhm.
crime genre, but then it's like,
Yeah. And there's drama in it too, like and there's mystery,
sure,
there's kind of like the procedural angle with it and like there's nothing really supernatural in either of them. So
right?
I think I feel like it's easier to put oh no, I don't want to I feel like Twitter would tear me apart if I tried to explain that.
It's
I
okay.
think that I think
I
that
don't want to block you in here, Todd.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
okay
yeah.
if,
No,
if you're getting
no,
in the
but
tangent here.
I think that horror generally is an emotion that's evoked from it.
Right.
So yeah.
And I think too, though, let's be honest, it's like good stories are good stories. They're
Mhm.
gonna have lots of conflict. There's gonna be some level of change. Maybe
Mhm.
it's not that much. Maybe only a few characters change and some just
Yeah.
don't. But it's too easy, I think, to almost like get caught up in this whole like which specific genre or
Yeah.
subgenre is it in? It's almost really in the eye of the beholder, don't you think? I
Mhm.
mean, like Jaws. What is Jaws? Is it a horror? Is it
Yeah.
action adventure? What is it? I mean,
Because it's been even just with I think probably my favorite movie of the year is the Substance with Demi
okay.
Moore.
I
It's an
have no idea what
amazing.
genre that would be even.
Okay, yeah, it's a disgusting, awesome body horror, and I've heard, like, depending on who you talk to, some people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is like one of the scariest, like most horrific things I've ever
Mhm.
seen," and others are like, "Oh my gosh, I was like cackling with laughter through it,"
Okay.
and other ones like, "It made me so angry, like filled with rage," and so yeah, I
Wow.
think it's and again
It's
that
in
was a
the eye
really
of the beholder, right? It's like
yes,
it's an
yeah,
opinion and the audience
hmm
can almost just
yeah.
decide and
Jaws is a great example of that too, because you think like, yes, there is like horror in here, and there's also some comedy and some drama too, and there's thrills. So, yeah.
right, right. Um, so as you've been in the screenwriting world, pitching, meeting with producers, going through all of that,
Mhm.
what have you learned so far? I mean, like, I've always been interested in it, but part of me is like, how do you do that if you're not in LA? How do you
Mhm.
do it if you're not in New York? I know there's the
Yeah.
internet and you can submit from anywhere, but I'm like,
Mhm.
isn't it really just who you know? Don't you have to like bump elbows with the producer at the coffee shop
Mhm.
in Hollywood, you know?
Yeah. I would say how to do it is find a really good therapist.
That's
um,
fair. That's fair.
um, yeah. So my connections were oh I do like I feel like I need like a mind map to even just to explain kind of my journey with making those connections. Most yeah, most of my connections and exposure was through like early pandemic days.
Okay.
That's when well before that there was a really vibrant screenwriting community on Twitter, and that's where I met a lot of friends, like for peer notes and stuff. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of support for each other. That's how I met my writing partner. And
Yeah.
there's you'll hear like there's weekly discourse that still goes on about like sharing your log line, like your 2 sentence little synopsis of what your project is.
Yep.
People say like, don't let them steal your ideas. It's like
Yeah.
um everyone has ideas, like no one can it's executing those ideas. That's what people are worried about. But but anyway, so I had tweeted my log line, and one producer, um he saw it and said, hey, like I've worked on this film, these are my credits, I your log line caught my interest, I'd like to read it. And he
Yeah.
said, so, and that led to my first like producer attachment deal that I got through
Okay.
that, and other things have kind of transpired through there. There's lots of yeah. I mean, I feel like I would love to be like in living in one of the cultural like epicenters of that,
Mhm.
to have the in person stuff. But I think that and that was one
It's
of
not
the
feasible for everyone
yeah,
to
it's
live in
not feasible for
California,
everyone.
right?
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
just like if you don't have like a backup plan or like
Right.
significant cushioning to land on.
Right.
So I think the world going on online and on Zoom, that opened up so many opportunities for someone like myself who's never
Yeah.
had an in-person meeting anywhere. So yeah, it's definitely it's all who you know. And
Going back to your first one, the very
yeah.
first one, because I think I remember this now.
Hmm.
Is that project, is it still being pitched or where like is that something you can talk about now, or is it something
Hmm.
that's still kind of you're
Yeah,
still
I can talk about it a
haven't
little bit. Not the specifics of the story, but
okay. Just the
yeah, but
general, because
just
I
sort of where it's
remember
at.
like
Yeah.
the log line and that was like
Hmm.
how do you think other writers should do that kind of thing if they're even
Yeah.
not screenwriting?
I think so. Like I like for where I wouldn't have had my chance, my any of my opportunities if I hadn't thrown my work out there to
Yeah.
engage people. It doesn't work for everyone, but my there's an awesome writer that yeah, they tweeted their log line, and then director saw it, and he had connections with Paramount Studios, and he read it, and it like the short and sweet is like it was from that they got their movie made by and released by Paramount last year. So
Yeah,
things do happen. It's not like, oh,
sure.
posting everything is going to do it, but what and I used to think that it was, people say like, oh, you just need one yes. That's all it takes. And
Yeah,
the one
however
yes
many it
definitely
takes.
that starts, but it's like that's the first of many yeses needed. So the story for that, or sorry, the kind of how that one progressed. There was a he signed an I signed an attachment agreement with the producer to kind of
Uh-huh.
work on developing it, and then he said, I think I actually want to basically get the rights from you to your story
The whole thing.
to kind of adapt it
Yeah,
into like a new feature. So it'd be like story by Todd Foley, screenplay by
right. I remember that.
X. So yeah, so that's kind of where it's at, and that's being he's still working away on that. And then the next kind of steps, like if you were to look at it linear, would be then taking that out to buyers, and then
Gotcha.
yeah, so it's like one series of another with that. So
Now, a lot of times it's a screenwritten, it's a screenplay from a screenwriter,
mhm,
and that's what a producer likes it. They get attached to it, and then they run with it. Basically, you're cheerleaders. But
mhm,
also, I see a lot of novels that are turned into screenplays.
mhm,
And it's like, obviously, the more popular the author, the more,
mhm,
interest by default, whether or not the story is, it's not so much unique. It's like Stephen King writes something. Heck
mhm.
yeah, we're gonna make it into a
Yeah, there's
movie.
an audience built
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
exactly. Um, but I've seen some, Todd, where it kind of surprises me. And I don't really want to name names because I don't think it'd be
Mhm,
right in that context. But like these books are not super popular. They might have like
mhm,
20 reviews, 30 reviews, something like that. And then I see it made into a big movie, and I'm just
mhm.
like, how that seems weird because you have a
Yeah.
novel that didn't like create a big splash. And I always kind of want to know, I'm sure you're wondering the same question too. It's like,
Mhm.
well, what happened behind the scenes? Was there chess going on behind the scenes?
Yeah.
And, how do you get a book that's not necessarily a smashing success that
Mhm.
becomes like a movie with, I don't know, Nicolas Cage or Mel Gibson or
Yeah.
some big actor, and you're like, what? Why? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
No, that's a great question, and I think that, yeah, I think a few things could be at play with it, like maybe maybe it was a very small publisher too,
Fair.
maybe
Yeah.
not just didn't get the reach that could have been there, and I think there could be a parallel with a producer reading a script from a completely unknown person
Mm.
like myself and saying, hey, like there's potential here. And
Yeah.
I think that we just need to get it to the right. And
Person.
even like for a script that gets picked up by a writer, like that's not going to be the draft probably that gets sold to a major studio or something like that.
Right.
So um yeah, I mean it's awesome exposure for an author to get that, to have their work
I
turned
mean,
into an adaptation.
part of
Well,
me,
it can
Todd,
be,
wonders,
yeah.
is it like, we don't know, and this is why I'm such an advocate for physical books. We don't
Mhm.
know who's going to pick up that book.
Mhm.
And I remember it was Aronofsky
Mhm.
found the Requiem for a Dream book, read it like in one day, and said, I'm making this into a movie.
Mhm.
And I think Hubert Selby had even passed at that time.
Mhm.
Like, it was just almost, I found this book, I read it, I loved it. I'm turning it into a movie
Mhm.
because the director had already
Yeah.
made their break. Or, I'm wondering if it's almost like one of those
Mhm.
things you just fall in love with a story and you're like,
Yeah.
let's go.
That's like, I mean, she makes it look so easy because she's so effortless. It just looks so effortless because she's such a powerhouse. But what Reese Witherspoon has done with her career with Hello Sunshine, and
She's
said like, I
genius.
love, she's like, I don't think I'm going to be a writer. Like that's not what I feel like my strengths are, but I love stories. And so
She's
she finds
she's
books, and
genius.
yeah, she totally is. She's
She's the new Oprah as
Yeah,
far as books
absolutely,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then adapting them into shows and into miniseries, and
Yeah.
I was like, I can't, like, I'm not gonna be able to write these, but I read these books and I believe in them, so I'm gonna buy the rights and
Yeah.
turn them into a hit. So I think
Yeah.
that,
It's so smart.
yeah, I know. I
That's
would love
so
to be
smart.
Reese one day.
Hang around Nashville long enough,
Yes.
I think you eventually run into her because she's
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
there. Let's talk about stories for a minute here.
Mhm.
Do you approach a screenplay differently than you do a novel? Say
Mm.
you're just, I mean, because I've seen Todd one
Yeah.
time, Park Dads, I believe, weren't you
Mhm.
making that a screenplay? And you said, "Phooey,
Yeah.
I'm making it a novel," and then you
Yeah.
released it as a novel.
Totally.
Do you
That's how
approach
it
it
started.
different?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was my it was really funny because that was my that was the second screenplay that I wrote, and like I loved the characters. I had so much fun with them, and did once where I paid a script consultant for notes
Mhm.
on reading it, and he said like it was brutal, but it was totally what I needed to hear because he
Yeah.
said like you've got great characters, you have great chemistry with them, like but nothing really happens in the story, and I'm like okay, like
Works
I
well
get
for
that now.
Seinfeld.
Yes, yeah, and so it was a great note though because I thought like oh, okay, like and then I thought well you know what like this was a great exercise in
You know what?
learning the craft, but then I thought, well, I'm
Yeah.
like, I still love it. And I said, I
Yeah.
think that maybe it's just this isn't the right format
Todd, I
for it.
haven't read
And
that book for years,
uh,
but I remember distinctly as you're mentioning it because I
mhm,
brought it up here, but I remember
yeah,
it was like I was like, "This is so what happened to you. This
yeah,
was your story.
uh,
You're in there," and it was very real life
hmm
in that it was literally a few kind of quiet dads just hanging out there with their kids,
hmm
and you strike up a friendship with other dads there. And it was
hmm
like it was very real life, and I think there was, like, something relaxing about it. I
hmm
do remember some conflict in it now the more I think about it,
yeah.
toward the
I think there
very
was a bit of
end,
yeah,
at the
yeah.
very
It built
end.
towards something,
Right,
and I
there
think
was,
it's
it
yeah,
wasn't a traditional,
hmm
3-act kind of thing
yeah.
with
It wasn't
several
necessarily a hero
turns.
like the hero's journey and everything.
Oh,
That
not so much on that one,
and
no.
not everything has to be too. Like I think there can be like very very quiet. And those are some of my um some movies that I absolutely love too, where it's like it's just a very kind of quiet,
Almost
meditative
hang
experience,
out,
right?
almost like you're hanging out with those characters.
Hmm.
Like, I feel
Yeah.
like I was at the park too, watching y'all just going,
Hmm.
"Yep, here we are. We're all just here at the
Yeah.
park," and yeah, it
Hmm.
was I think there's something kinda relaxing about it versus
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, Todd, this is the opposite of some of these high octane thrillers and
Hmm.
horrors. This is almost like
Yeah.
letting out a breath
Yeah. It felt
versus
very off brand for
holding your
me
breath.
as a storyteller. But at the same time, it was sort of like yeah, like you said, I think there was that kind of that it was sort of more of like, I don't know if I wouldn't call it like a coffee house vibes kind of
I feel like you're not
versus
far off, though. It's in that
yeah,
direction.
yeah,
Yeah.
where it's something so like and I think it kind of goes back to that still that feeling of catharsis that I try to aim for where
Mhm.
um you know what, like it goes down easy. It's not like there's no big world building in here. Like it's literally like
Yeah.
at the house and at the park. But the things that happen and like there's emotion that's
It
there.
was
And
Gilmore Girls-esque in a sense
yes,
too.
totally. Yeah, just yeah,
The more I
like
think
very
about it now,
dialogue
okay,
heavy. Yeah.
yeah, it was dialogue and it was like
Hmm.
hanging out and basic day-to-day
Hmm.
life stuff. And I mean,
Yeah.
I I find it kind of relaxing and comforting. And I mean, that's
Hmm.
what people want to watch on TV
Yeah.
versus something you can kind of watch, but not like, did I miss
Yeah.
this? Did I miss that kind of thing?
Hmm. Yeah. And I
Did
think
I
that it
miss the big
felt
moments?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And especially when something like this, like sometimes if a story is just comprised of like those small moments too. And I think and there's something beautiful and that's kind of what I had tried to that was my hope with it was like, you're probably it's something that you can read in one setting. I think it was like 120
Yeah.
pages
Yeah, it
with
was
like
nice and
big
short.
margins too. But you kind of go through it. I know we
Love
were
it.
just talking about like, oh, like bring back 90-minute movies. And where it's like this is probably something that you could just read like in an hour on the couch on a Saturday afternoon. And it's yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
I think there's a
you're not on edge. No one's dying. You know what I
mhm,
mean? It's,
yeah.
it's there's room for all kinds of stories.
Mhm. absolutely
All
there is.
kinds. I
Yeah.
don't care if it's the monster of the week or thriller or, coffee shop kind of vibes. There's
Mhm.
room for these.
Yeah.
Are you typically starting with a character or is it more plot
Mhm.
usually? Does it
I feel like I
depend?
usually start with a little bit of a hook, like, with my screenplays, I try to start with a log line, like,
Mm,
this is kind of like the central hook, but then I
mhm,
spend a lot of time trying to get to know the characters, because I've seen, like, yeah, the thing, I think movies that frustrate me, or books too, is when, like, I feel like I can't, any character could have played this character. Not any
right,
actor could have played this role, but
right.
if the when a character is very like very dispensable,
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a hard time caring about them.
Average person, average woman,
Yeah.
average
Yeah,
guy.
who,
Yeah,
like, who does
very
all the right things, says all the right things.
yeah.
And I like to be confront someone who can, like, confront the reader, or maybe offend the audience, because that's what, like, humans are pretty offensive
It's
beings,
fair.
just by being imperfect. And
Yeah.
I think if it's not, yeah, so I think I have a hard time trying to write anything authentic if I can't um, get behind who the characters are. So yeah, I spend a lot of time with my characters usually before I start writing. So
Yes, just the other day, I was literally breaking out the Enneagram
hmm
and, like, looking up characters and
uh,
stuff and all that, and I was like, "Oh, it's like you're getting answers for your
hmm
story when you know
uh,
how that character thinks versus." I think it's easy to make characters a little inconsistent if you don't know them very well.
hmm
You're not sure of their personality or their quirks or vices or whatever, and,
hmm
like, what are their goals? What do they love? What do they hate? That kinda stuff, and
hmm
without that, I'm kinda like, I know I'm faking it because I don't know the answers to these
hmm
questions.
yeah, 100%.
The Enneagram's pretty handy for that. I think it's so
hmm
much nicer for characters than, like, real
Oh yeah,
life.
then, like, yeah,
You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
like, "Ooh, you're a this, you're a that," and I'm like, "Works great for people on the page." I try not to
yeah.
use it with
Well, and
anybody in
yeah,
real
I know,
life.
and I love,
It's too
like,
easy to
and I
stereotype.
love the interactions that you can do. Like, I guess it's similar. Like, it's nothing groundbreaking. Like, people have been doing this since the beginning of time, with, like, with your, like, oh, like, what's your sign, and, like, how do you make a compatible partner, or something like
Right,
that.
yin
And
yang,
I
yep,
love
yep,
that the Enneagram has that too. Like, what would a 5 wing 3 be like with a 9 wing 2, or whatever, and
right,
it can just spell that out a bit. So yeah, I totally do that too, because you think, like, well, what is this person afraid of? What do they want? How do they react to stress? How do they do this? So
right.
yeah, it's a
Do you
fantastic
cast
tool.
your stuff at all? Do you cast your characters? Do you kinda go, I'm gonna put"
Yeah.
like, so you're visually like, I'm so
Mhm.
visual. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm pulling scenes and locations and stuff. I'm a director
Mhm.
secretly.
Yes. Totally. I think I used to be, for sure. I've gotten the further I've gone, the less I've done that, but I sometimes I'll kinda do, like, a bit of, like, a Pinterest board, or, like, a mood board,
Mhm.
and, I'll pull in, um, maybe not act like, the actor or the actress who could play this character, but, like, other characters who other fictional characters who could fit this vibe.
Yeah.
So it might be, I don't even know, I'm trying to think right now. It could be like, I'm not writing any spy stuff, but it'd be like, okay, like, is it gonna be, I'll pull James Bond, and I'll
Yeah.
pull
Yeah.
whoever else. If
Yeah.
they're I
I mean,
can't
we
think of any
can't
spies
we can't
right now.
typically pull
Yeah,
off a, "Hey, I'm taking James Bond from this story and popping him over here,"
yeah,
but you can find a few characters and be like,
mhm,
"Hey, that one side character right here," whoop, and
yeah.
that one character there that didn't get that much attention. You're like, "Hey, I like the idea of this," so
Mhm,
go and dial it up a
yeah,
notch. What's your favorite part about screenwriting versus just writing books or other forms of content? What's your favorite part? Because you're obviously all in
mhm,
and you love it.
yeah.
Is it because of the visual part? You know, it's like you can kind of shape something.
Yeah, like I think that I don't know. I feel like if you're whether you're writing a book, writing for the like for something that will be like held in someone's hands in a book, or um or seen on a screen, or even just like if you're hearing like commercials on the radio,
Hmm?
things like those all start with scripts. Those all start with words. So I think it's um yeah, like writers really are the architects of everything. We don't get any of the glory or the credit for
That's
it.
true. That's true.
Um, but nothing can, and that's why it was so powerful. Like with the WGA strikes last year, was the message was, you know what, like there
Who
is no
cares?
production, there is nothing without the writers who start,
Right.
like who build these characters. Like actors have nothing to perform, directors have nothing
Right.
to direct, set
Right.
builders have nothing to design because nothing's been come from that. So I think it's a pretty it's a yeah, like we've been storytellers since the beginning of time, and it's helped me rediscover just a sense of play too. Like I feel like the
Ooh,
older
I
I
like
get and the
that.
more I do it, the
Yeah.
more it's like me playing with my action figures again.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah, I
it's
try to
the
chase the fun.
nature of it. It's so stripped down and so visual, and you're thinking
Hmm.
more camera angles, and it makes sense. I mean, it
Yeah,
really is more playful in a sense. You're not worried about paragraphs
yeah.
or prose or anything like that. You're really cutting to the basics of the character and then kind of building up
Hmm.
from there.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Any of your favorite books that you would recommend for making
Ooh.
and building stories?
I have a few in front of me right now that are propping up my laptop.
Nice. That's all
uh,
right. I get that.
yeah, I'm gonna leave them there because that's how they get it.
That's fine.
Yeah, like Brothers by Mark Duplass and Jay Duplass.
Okay.
They are just that was the first writing book that I picked up, and they are some of my favorite creators. Just their relationship as brothers and also as storytellers, and their tenacity. Just tilted my head. I got Characters in Viewpoint by Orson Scott Card. I've
Oh
used that
yeah.
for novels and for screenwriting as well. And then I'm a massive fan of Fleabag, the show.
Yeah.
So I have her. It's called The Scriptures. It's kind of basically looks like an old Bible, but it's her both seasons, every episode in a book package of all of
Yeah.
her scripts and then her notes.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
and then my fun purchases that I've gotten for me. I'm a huge Jordan Peele fan, so I think for all three of his movies, they've got like a basically an annotated screenplay
Mhm.
where he includes like deleted scenes and then his footnotes behind like
That's
his Easter
cool.
eggs or his thoughts and stuff
That's
like that. So
cool. That's
yeah,
so fun.
yeah,
You get to
you
geek out.
absolutely geek out, yeah, and that helps
That's
you.
great.
You know what? It helps you write your own curriculum too.
I
So
like that though, and
uh,
I like that you're like I even asked you for craft books, and you're kind of like, actually, I go to my favorites, and some of
yeah,
them already did it for me. That's
yeah,
awesome. That's
totally.
a way to go deeper because you're getting more
Hmm.
specific. I love that, Todd.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Really
yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks.
Any parting words for other writers and story builders? You've
Uh,
been doing this for quite a
yeah.
while, and you've you've been so experienced. I feel like
Mm,
you've kind of been there, done that in a lot of different areas. What
yeah.
helps you?
I would say
What do you think would help somebody else?
keep trying things in different areas. Kill your darlings if you need to.
That's fair.
There's always a next draft.
Mm,
Be compassionate with yourself. Show yourself a lot
mm.
of grace because nothing's going to be. There can always be better, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, things can always be. There can always be better. I'm a writer. I can talk. There's
I
a
think a
reason I'm a
few of those
writer,
would
not a
look great
speaker.
on a
Yeah.
throw pillow.
Yes.
So
There can always
I'm
be
not
better. Yeah.
that
We'll
would be
just make that
fine on
my
a
motto.
throw pillow.
Yeah.
I would like to hang that up too.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be
Yeah.
okay with that because I
Mhm.
think we need the encouragement.
Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much. Any where that the viewers and listeners can get in touch with you as far as your
Yeah. I
website?
used to I'm not on Twitter very much anymore, just personal reasons, but my handle is at Todd Foley Writes.
Mhm.
So first last name and then WRITES. I do still have a bit of a presence on Twitter, but also on Blue Sky. So that's kind of where I
Cool.
live live tweet my
Yeah, that's
my writing
great.
journey. So yeah.
Awesome. Love it.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you so
thanks
much
so
for
much,
being with
Jen.
me. Thank
Yeah.
you. This is so much fun. Let's do it again soon.
Mhm. Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.